Just a little heads up, I do have a short update to give before this episode starts, so if you want to skip ahead to the actual video, just go to the timestamp displayed on screen. Normally I'd put an annotation here, but YouTube has decided it doesn't like those anymore. At the time the audio for this video was recorded, I'm holding an art contest to celebrate both the upcoming 50th episode of Character Development and the show's 3-year anniversary. All submissions will be featured in an art showcase during the 50th episode. So if you'd like to participate, there's a link in the description of this video to an update where I explain the rules. You have until June 25th to submit any art, if you're interested. All that said and done, we now return to your regularly scheduled programming. Mabuhay, mga kapatid! Kamusta na pa kayo? Pardon my probably terrible Tagalog. I've been pretty excited to get a crack at talking about the Philippines for a decent while now. Even though the Philippines have had a rich history as being the crossroads of multiple cultures such as India, Malaysia, Spain, China, Japan, and the United States, it hasn't really been in the spotlight all that often in the interactive medium. On a similar note, I had been keeping an eye on the console release of Tekken 7 for a while, as I've thought about covering a recurring character from this series like Ogre, Elisa, or King since about episode 30 or so. But the more I heard about Tekken 7, the more interested I became in the possibility of talking about one of the newcomers, like Shaheen or Claudio Serafino. Imagine my surprise then when I found out, just last week in fact, that these two interests met at a crossroads. Indeed, one of the new characters in Tekken 7 is a bright-eyed Filipina fighter named Josie Rizal. Even though she's had her fair share of mixed reception since being unveiled in 2015, I still want to ask, how did the Tekken franchise do with its first foray into the Philippines? Are there any details to Josie's design that tie into the rich culture and history of the Philippines? I'm happy to say that there's quite an interesting episode ahead of us today. I'm the Kitsune Hawk, and today we'll be looking into the background of one of Tekken 7's newcomers, the Filipina model and kickboxer Josie Rizal. So get out your pencils, trivia enthusiasts, because this is Character Development. Even though Filipino culture isn't something seen very often in video games, the references to it in Josie's design and background are actually very straightforward and easy to spot. There's a very obvious nod to the history of the Philippines with Josie's name. In fact, it's just a feminine version of the name Jose Rizal. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Realanda, known simply as Jose Rizal, was a Filipino Renaissance man, with accolades as a poet, physician, journalist, artist, activist, author, politician, and many more. Born in 1861, he lived at a time when the Philippines were still a colonial possession of the Spanish Empire. Sneaking aboard a ship to Spain in 1882, Jose Rizal received his advanced education in Europe, studying in Madrid, Paris, and Heidelberg, even learning to speak and write in as many as 22 languages before he returned to the Philippines in 1892. Rizal did much of his writing while in Europe. His novels and editorials tended to focus on criticizing the Catholic Church and Spanish rule over the Philippines, quickly making him a person of suspicion to the Spanish government. Taking his pen to politics, Jose Rizal proposed reforms the Spanish colonial government could take to give equal rights for Filipinos, especially freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, equality before the law, and Filipino representation within the Cortes Generales, Spain's legislative body. Independence for the Philippines, however, was something Rizal never vouched for. But that didn't stop the Spanish government from labeling him as a dangerous radical, arresting and exiling him as soon as he returned to his home country in 1892. By 1896, revolutionary fervor in the Philippines reached its breaking point. Rizal expressed his disdain for the violence of his peers and was given permission to migrate to Cuba. Before leaving, however, he was arrested again, tried by the Spanish government for charges of rebellion, sedition, and conspiracy. Despite a lack of any evidence connecting Jose Rizal to the ongoing revolution, he was found guilty and sentenced to death, executed by a firing squad at only 35 years of age. Even though Rizal didn't support the idea of independent Philippines, his death convinced the Filipino rebels that negotiating with the Spanish was no longer an option. and after the Philippines declared their independence from Spain in 1898, Rizal gained a posthumous reputation as a de facto national hero, often called the first Filipino. Jose Rizal has had monuments built in dedication of his life, as well as streets, towns, laws, and even an entire province of the Philippines named after him. Even species of lizards, beetles, and frogs have been named after Jose Rizal, showing how much of an impression he left on the history of the Philippines. So the idea of Tekken having its first Filipina character named in honor of the late 19th century polymath makes enough sense. From her name, we now move on to Josie's default design, which is fittingly inspired by the flag of the Philippines, itself a symbol of independence from Spain. Josie's outfit utilizes the four colors of the Filipino flag. Red, as seen on her headband, skirt, and belt, for courage and patriotism. Golden yellow, as seen on her top and sandals, for unity and freedom. Blue, again, seen on her skirt, for self-sacrifice, truth, and justice. And white, which makes up the floral patterns on her top, for liberty, equality, and fraternity. Additionally, Josie's outfit is adorned with sun and star-shaped accessories, such as her earrings, necklace, and belt buckle, as well as the tails on her skirt and the shapes on her sandals. With regards to the flag of the Philippines, the sun and its 8 rays represent the 8 provinces that participated in the Philippine Revolution against Spain in 1896. Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Pampanga, Bataan, Laguna, Batangas, and Nueva Ecija. As for the trio of stars surrounding the sun, they represent the 3 islands where the revolution took place: Visayas, Luzon, and Mindanao. That revolution, by the way, was partially inspired by the writings of Jose Rizal. Another detail in Josie's design that references Filipino culture is the aforementioned pattern on her top, which is inspired by the Arabian jasmine. This particular flower is known in Tagalog as sampaguita, and is recognized as the national flower of the Philippines. Garlands of sampaguita flowers are frequently used as decoration for altars, graduations, weddings, and many other occasions, so it's definitely a flower close to the people of the Philippines. Adding to this, Josie's concept art refers to the floral patterns as sumpakita, a Tagalog phrase that means I promise you, a phrase that also happens to be the origin of the word sampaguita. Quite a few of Josie's moves take their names from actual locations in the Philippines, namely Iligan Switch, Ormoc Switch, Sapu Switch, Subic Ring, Panggil Ring, Lingayen Stomp, and Kawasan Falls. 2 more of her moves, Carabao Horn and Reverse Sampaguita, are named after national symbols of the Philippines, the national animal and the national flower respectively. Funny I mentioned Tagalog a minute ago too, as Josie, rather unusually, doesn't speak a word of it, instead speaking standard English. Both Tagalog and English are considered the official languages of the Philippines, with Tagalog being slightly more common than English as a native language. So while it's not particularly unusual for Josie to primarily speak English, it is a bit odd that she doesn't speak any Tagalog at all, or that she doesn't have any trace of an accent. As for Josie's fighting style, she's referred to as a kickboxer whose techniques are inspired by eskrima. Eskrima, also known as Kali or Arnis, is a Filipino martial art that focuses primarily on defending oneself against an opponent with weapons, usually knives, machetes, or clubs. While it's intended for people wielding a weapon themselves, it is still possible to use eskrima techniques while unarmed. Footwork is the most important part of eskrima, whether it's for dodging, covering, or countering, though unarmed eskrima is much more defense-oriented, emphasizing grappling and disarming alongside footwork. By mixing unarmed eskrima with kickboxing techniques, Josie's style might very well be based on yaw-yan, also known as the Dance of Death, a mix of Filipino martial arts and kickboxing started in the 1970s by Napoleon Fernandez. Ultimately, with Tekken's first ever fighter from the Philippines, I'd say they did well with Josie Rizal. It may be much more straightforward than other characters I've discussed in previous episodes of the show, and there is a bit of a hodgepodge of geographical terms in her move list, but the design strongly inspired by the Filipino flag and the name inspired by the national hero Jose Rizal certainly make up for it. Tekken 7's PC and console release is still pretty recent at the time of this video, so this could very well only be scratching the surface with Josie's Filipino background. If not, then here's hoping she shows up in a future installment. Preferably speaking just a little bit of Tagalog, and maybe sharing at least one occupation with the person she's named after. Oh well, just a thought.